guys, welcome back to the channel. It's your sister Naima B. Robert here with another show to provoke your thoughts, to potentially get you in your feelings, but most importantly, to help us to figure out this quandary of marriage and relationships for Muslims in the modern day. And I'm joined by a regular on this channel, my brother Nasir al Amin. Assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you doing today?
Wa alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Guys, I'm really excited about this new series, really, that we've embarked on, because what we're trying to do is, Nasir, is to provide two perspectives on some of the most topical issues that we've been hearing about, some of the issues that are causing our brothers and sisters consternation, frustration, and I'll be coming from my perspective as a woman, as somebody who's been in a long-term marriage, who's been on the other side of that, and also has access to the stories of sisters around the world. Tell them what perspective you'll be coming from, inshallah.
I'll be coming from the male perspective, which is the right perspective.
Oh my God, here we go. All right, those of you who want to log off, you're free to log off now, okay? He already started, okay.
Oh, so you want me to backtrack from that?
No, just continue to give yourself a chance to redeem yourself. Yes, it will be good.
I appreciate that. So actually, I will be coming from the male perspective. And obviously, I don't speak for all men, but I like to think that I have my ear to what men are saying, but also for what women are saying, right? And I think that that's a unique aspect that we both will bring, is that we're bringing a diversity of thought from both brothers and sisters. Right? As you know, I've said it a couple times, numerous times on your show, that my client base is majority women, right? So I think it's an interesting dynamic in terms of maybe what sisters will share with me that maybe they won't share with you, right? Same thing with brothers, right? So not only am I bringing the male's perspective, which is the right perspective, but I think I'm also bringing that unique aspect of the work I do as a coach with Muslim brothers and sisters.
MashaAllah, fantastic. Well, aside from the right perspective, I wanted to talk. We decided that our first episode is going to be on the topic of emotions, because every time, somebody reaches out to you, every time someone reaches out to me, every time somebody vents on social media, every time somebody records, a tearful video, what is at the root of that? It's emotions, right? And I think it's safe to say that one of the reasons that we find relationships so difficult is because we get in our feelings. Our emotions our emotions shape our reality, right? Would you agree with that?
I think our emotions are the things that we see easier, right? That's the thing that we are. So I often tell clients that your emotions are a red flag, right? Your emotions are a red flag to let you know to think about your thinking, right? So your emotions is the thing that you will see first, but really it's not the emotions that's the issue, it's the thinking, right? Hence, that's what they say, the thinking, feeling, connection. So your thinkings, your thoughts produce an emotion. And typically the thought is not what you see first or sense first, it's the emotion that you feel. Hence, one of a technique that people can do is once you start sensing something, an emotion that's uncomfortable, ask yourself, what am I telling myself? Right? So when you ask yourself, what are you telling yourself? Thoughts fuel emotions. So the way that your thoughts go is the way that your emotions are going to go.
Right, that reminds me very much of something that I learned from Stephen Covey in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective Everything, right? And that is the pause between, stimulus and response. And that in that pause, there is power, right? So for those of us who are watching and who are married and who are in relationships, a lot of the time we don't pause before reacting, right? So something will happen, whatever it may be. Sisters, you guys can fill in the blanks, okay? Put in the comments below the types of things that happen that cause you to get into your feelings, to start feeling a particular kind of way. whether it's that, you know, he didn't text back right away, or he forgot your anniversary, or, you know, any of the things that happen that get us into our feelings and get us into a heightened emotional state, just drop in the comments, because I'd love to see the types of things that trigger you. But so are you saying then the fact that I'm upset that my husband hasn't texted me for however many hours, that's my fault? Like, unpack that a little bit.
So since I always come from the right perspective, which is the male perspective, what I would say is, let's not, I wouldn't say fault.
Mm-hmm.
What I would lean more into is responsibility, right? It's your responsibility for the emotions you create based off of the adversity that happens. And so this isn't coming from me, this is coming from a modality called CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. So essentially what it says is there's this event that happens, and then there's a thought that occurs, a narrative we create, the meaning we create about the event, and then that produces how we feel, our physiological response, but also what we do. So your husband not texting you is it's the adversity, it's the challenge, right? The space between the adversity and how you feel and what you do is the part you're responsible for. And that's the narrative you create about why he didn't text you. And that's what you're responsible for. And if you're responsible for the narrative and the meaning you create, subsequently, you're responsible for how you feel. So as a side note, did you like the way how I just actually kind of said, yeah, I'm right, and proved how I was right by taking you through the model? It was good.
We love the model. Okay, yeah, we love the model. We approve of the model, yes. And I definitely approve the message of, you know, taking responsibility for our emotions, mainly because, you know, certainly, and again, readers feel free to push back, but I do think that, you know, as women, we do feel a lot deeper, and our feelings impact our lived experience a lot more. It's a lot harder, I think, for us to rationalize things. I don't know. Yeah.
One other point with that is, so all jokes aside, that's for both, right? So husband comes home, doesn't like the greeting or the lack thereof that he gets from his wife, that becomes the A. The narrative he creates in the middle. So taking it a bit on a macro level, the model says A plus B equals C. A is the adversity, B is the beliefs, that narrative you create, equals C, how you feel internally, physiological, your emotions, and what you do. The A, you come home, you don't get the response from your wife that you like. That B, the beliefs, is what you're in control of. You're not in control of how she responds to you when you get home. The B is how you respond. I mean, the beliefs, the narrative you create in response, the meaning you create in response to her not greeting you in the manner that you think she should, i.e. she should. You create a demand. I went out all day, worked for 8 hours. I come home, you should greet me a certain way. You should have the house looking a certain way. You should this, right? That's a bunch of demands that a man can create. And it's okay to have preferences, which is a de-escalated form of a demand. And in both cases, when your husband didn't text you, you created a demand that he must text me by this time, right? And say these words, and he must do it. And if he doesn't, I can't stand it.
Right.
If she doesn't greet me when I walk in the house a certain way, and, you know, I can't stand it, and it's terrible, it's the end of the world. This is the narrative we create. And then that type of narrative is going to produce certain emotions. So it's on the brother and the sister, the husband and the wife, to be responsible for backtracking, checking those thoughts. Hence, I said, when you sense something, you feel something, you ask yourself, what are you telling yourself? So it's on the husband to ask himself, what am I telling myself right now about the way she greeted me or the lack thereof?
Right. So what we're doing basically is we're catching the feeling. There's a a phrase called catch the thought, but in this case, we're catching the feeling first, right? We're catching the feeling, say, okay, what is it that's coming up for me right now? And what are the thoughts that are producing this feeling? And I think we're all familiar with the idea of stories, right? The stories that we tell ourselves. And those stories can come from anywhere. They can come from your childhood. They can come from your past experience, maybe even recent experience with your spouse, where the story you tell yourself is he always, she never. As you said, he should know better. She should have figured it out. These stories that are not necessarily untrue, but are often unhelpful. I would like to know, sort of from your perspective, how much
if I can, though,
the work of,
if I can, though, let me push back, because technically it might not be true. And that's an important point.
No, it could be true. Yeah, no, it could be true,
right.
And it could not be. So I think the point I'm making is that the story that you're telling yourself is not necessarily a fabrication that's completely, devoid of reality, but often it's skewed towards a particular narrative, right? So, for example, if as a woman I'm feeling insecure for whatever reason, I'm feeling insecure, I'm not feeling that confident, or I'm feeling needy in some kind of way, which is on me. If I don't get the response that I'm looking for, then I start to tell myself a story, right? And that story is fed by my insecurity that is already there. So if I haven't caught the emotion and said, hold on a minute, where is this coming from? Why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this way? What are the thoughts that are producing it? Then I'm going to then respond in a way that may not be helpful and may even exacerbate the situation, right? Would you agree with that?
Right. 100%. 100%. And one of the things that brothers and sisters can do is listen to what they tell themselves. Listen for the demands, right? The shoulds and the musts, right? Because there's nothing wrong with having a preference that he call you, at a certain time every day. There's nothing wrong with that if it's a preference. Where it becomes problematic and where it's always unhelpful and it's always untrue is when it's a demand. Because the reality is we can't place demands on people. We can have a preference and want for them to fit into that preference, but you can't demand it.
Right.
It's the same thing with a husband. You can't demand that your husband, that your wife respond to you a certain way when you walk in the house. It can be an expectation, but it has to be a loose expectation, i.e. a preference and not a demand, because the reality is she don't have to do it. Right. I mean, that's just reality.
Like, yeah, I mean, we can't control anyone except ourselves at the end of the day, right?
And this is the nuance. And this is the part where it's about being strategic. You can't control anyone, but you do have the power to influence. And this is why it's worth it for you in a relationship to be strategic in the sense of I'm responsible for my emotions. So then it's important to me to learn how to de-escalate my emotions so that I'm in the best space emotionally to influence him or her to do what I think is best.
Right. So I'm going to ask this because I know that this is a question that a lot of women will be wanting the answers to. But before we move on to that, just wrapping up or sort of putting a pin in the idea of taking ownership of our emotions, because I think a lot of us, and this is in the coaching work that I've done over the years, we have a tendency to blame others for our emotional states, right? I feel this way because so-and-so did this, so-and-so didn't do that. That is why I feel bad. That's why I feel shame, guilt, whatever the negative emotion is because somebody else did something, right? And I think what we're saying is, take ownership of that, because that emotion that you're feeling is as a result of the story that you're telling yourself and of the thoughts that you're entertaining. So if you don't want to feel that way, you may want to change the story, right? So I guess the big question for sisters is, well, how can I make him do what I want? How can I get my husband to respond to my emotions in the best way. Now, we're laughing, but it's actually very serious, because I think, and again, please feel free to push back in the comments, everyone. But I think as women, we do want our emotions validated, and we want our spouse to see us, right? For whatever it is, whether we're feeling, anxious or frustrated or just tired or sad or whatever the case may be. But sometimes the way in which we go about trying to get that validation, or even just that emotional connection to be seen, can be counterproductive. Now, that's my perspective, that's my view. Brother Nasir, what do you think as a man? Do we do that?
So as a man coming from the right perspective, the only perspective, what I would say is a point for sisters and brothers.
Please ignore him, everybody, every time he says that. Just block it out. Every time he says that, just block it out. Yes, carry on.
I gotta poke the masculinas out there. So the thing to remember, the thing for people to remember is this, brothers and sisters. When we're talking about this issue of wanting the emotion to be validated, emotions are always valid, right? Always. The emotion is always valid. Okay? Yeah, I just set you up. I got you on board. The emotions are always
because I disagree with that. I actually disagree with that, but go on.
Yeah, you agree. Yeah. Emotion is always valid, but the thinking that underpins may not be accurate. Right? So again, emotion is always valid, but the thinking that underpins it may not be accurate. Because remember what I said in the beginning, it's the thinking, feeling connection. How you think is going to yield how you feel. Thoughts fuel emotions. So the emotion is accurate, it's valid to the thinking that you had.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So if the thinking is off, or put better, if the thinking is intense, the emotions are going to be intense. Hence, if the thinking is intense, you may produce anxiety versus the de-escalated thinking that will produce the healthy alternative, which is concern.
Yeah.
I want to be concerned why my husband is not contacting me. I want to be concerned why my wife is not greeting me a certain way when I come in.
Yeah.
I don't want to be as anxious, but I don't want to be as angry.
Right.
And to backtrack, just to make sure that, because I've heard this from sisters, it's not about trying to ignore your emotions, and it's not trying to make you feel happy in an uncomfortable situation.
Right.
It's about acknowledging that there are helpful negative emotions that are more constructive for you to be able to influence the situation, to be able to stay in the conversation, to be able to respond in a constructive way. Hence, it's the healthy alternative to anger is irritation or annoyance or frustration. The healthy alternative to depression is sadness. It's not being happy. The healthy alternative to anxiety is concern. So how do you de-escalate your thinking in order to go from anxiety to concern?
And I want to just let everybody know, sorry, brother, I just want to let everybody know that I'm going to we will link to the talk that you did, the intimacy conversation, because you actually broke down the model of everything that he's saying. He broke it down in the model, inshallah. So we'll link that in the description, because I think it'll be useful for people to kind of go over that again. So you all noticed that he didn't answer the question, which was, how can we get our spouses to respond to us and to our emotions in a healthy way, a way that is productive? What does that look like?
So, Miss Naima B. Roberts, I gave you part one of the answer. Part two. So part one is understanding that, one, as we said, you're responsible for your emotions. The emotion is valid. You need to come back though and check the accuracy of the thinking that's producing the emotion. So in order to influence, not control, in order to influence your husband, you need to be able to get in the best space mentally and emotionally to be able to articulate what it is that you think is best. That's what it is. And that's the work you have to do. And the reason why you should do it is because you believe it's worth it to you, because what you want him to do is in the best interest of the family, right? So if you want to be able to influence him, you have to do the work to get in the best space, because no man wants to hear from a nagging, screaming, yelling, annoying, disrespectful tone and disrespectful diction of a woman. And if that's you, sis, when you articulate what you want when you're not getting what you want, then you can do that. But the likelihood of you getting what you want when you want it is limited. So do the work to de-escalate yourself. Be accountable for the emotion that you create in order to get in the best space mentally and emotionally. So then you can have the conversation. Hence, another part that I know that you know is that, and something that younger women may not always grasp, is there's a time and a place.
100%. That's what can I just say, just sorry to jump in there, but I remember learning this lesson in the early days of my marriage, and just that one thing, I don't even know where I learned it from, because I wasn't up on reading about marriage and all that kind of thing in those days, I don't think. But the idea of this can wait, of parking this until the emotions have simmered down and we can have a constructive conversation. Sisters, young sisters out there, seriously, this is game that we're giving you right now, and brothers as well, right? Because there is such a temptation for us to deal with it right away, right? Deal with it right away, get it out. But the problem with that is that typically you will find that the other person is in defense mode at that stage, right? Because you're going to come out of the gate, guns blazing, saying whatever it is you're going to say and however you're going to say it, whether it's tears, whether it's anger, whether it's shouting, whatever the case may be. It could be passive aggressive, it could be everything, right? But the point is that you are in your feelings and you're venting those feelings on your spouse. The typical response for most people is to put up defenses, right? To defend themselves from the attack, which is normal, right? It's normal human behavior. You're being attacked, you're going to defend. But when one is in attack mode and the other is in defense mode, you guys are not having a conversation. You are not having a conversation because neither of you is listening to the other, and neither is the other one sort of speaking to be heard, to be understood, and the other one is not listening either. So I definitely just wanted to jump in there and co-sign on that, because I think it's really huge. There's a time and a place. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the language that you use, and that's an important one for sisters to and brothers to acknowledge is, look, if you're not willing to park the conversation, more than likely you have a demand. You have a demand that what you think must happen or should not happen must be addressed right now. And what you think actually is the issue must be the way you think it is, right? We always want to look for the demands, right? What the model says is the thing that typically upsets us are the demands that we place on ourselves, on others, and life conditions, right? And in the context, I think, of our faith, I would suggest that with what I see oftentimes, although most of my clients don't realize it at first, is we also subtly place demands on Allah.
It should be this way.
Exactly.
I should have this. This is how it should be. This is how it should be.
And an example that came up this week was the conversation about weight, that post that I made about weight, demanding that brothers must accept me as I am. And that's a demand.
And it's a demand that we're going to get into in the next segment, actually, of this show, inshallah. So, guys, if you've enjoyed this, please do make sure that you give the video a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Put your comments below. We cannot wait to continue this conversation in the very next segment, inshallah. We'll see you on the other side, bi'idhnillah.